front part of you, the closest part to the hole, is pulled more strongly than the back part. It's like saying the gravitational force starting, if you imagine a spherical object like a planet, the Earth, the gravitational force starts at the maximum close to the center of the Earth, and then the gravitational force of the Earth diminishes as you go farther and farther away. If you were to imagine shrinking the Earth down to the size of a pea or something like that, and then you try to approach the Earth and it's the size of a pea, you'd have to be small too. But then you could feel this gravitational gradient. Gradient means change from one position to another. The gravitational gradient just due to the spherical gravitational field. And the part that's closest to the center, if it's the size of a pea, that'd be the part that's closest to the pea is being pulled the most. The part of the body that's farthest from the center is pulled the least, and that means that the front accelerates faster than the back, and you get a stretch. The opposite of the point source, the point force situation, was a compression. You squish yourself. And if you have the opposite situation of a field force like gravity, the source of the field, you get closer to the source of the field, it gets stronger. But every point in space around this gravitating object has a value of force in it, and if you have one point that's a certain distance from the center, and another point that's a farther distance from the center, the one that's closer is going to be accelerated more than the one at the back, and you get a stretch going on.
Very interesting. Now, I got a couple questions I asked you here before the end of you being on. I've had people ask me numerous times here when they found out you were going to be a guest on tonight, what got you into ufology? What was the move that got you where you became interested in UFOs and abductions?
Well, I suppose I could say I was nuts. Did not have to do with any desire for UFOs to be real. A lot of skeptical arguments disparaging ufologists. Skeptics often say, well, this guy wanted the UFOs to be real, and so therefore he found them, and willing to twist the data to make it fit the idea that UFOs are real. That wasn't me. But back in the 60s, the latter half of the 60s, when Congress directed Project Blue Book to support an independent study of UFOs. Project Blue Book was the Air Force's project from the late 40s up through the late 60s. It was the Air Force project to handle the problem of flying saucers. By handle, I mean explain any way possible. And it's well known, of course, that the Air Force looked at between early 1947 and the end of 1969, the Air Force studied about 13,000 cases, of which 701 were left unexplained. The bad boys didn't know how to explain them all. It's such an important result that James Fox was making a movie anyway called 701. I don't know if that's still in the middle or not, but anyway, in the latter 60s, for a period of time, while the Air Force was supporting an investigation held at the University of Colorado, UFOs made it into the news in 1965 and 66. There were flaps of sightings, and a lot of the sightings, it was a standard situation that some people would report seeing weird things, and some of those people were highly credible, like police officers and so on. People would report strange things, and the Air Force would come along and say, oh, it was the planet Venus, it was the planet Jupiter, it was birds, planes, maybe even Superman, but not UFOs. Well, for a time there, 67, 68, 69 time frame, it was okay to talk about UFOs without having a bag over your head. So I joined the UFO organization. I read a book, UFO Serious Business, by Frank Edwards, which was a very effective book for turning around a lot of people onto the subject back then. But I studying these books, reading the books about sightings. Primarily, it would be one sighting after another with some discussion of the sightings. I noted that in many cases, the sightings, explanations offered by the Air Force were wrong. Could not have been true, like saying something was a mirage when mirages weren't likely to have occurred. The first sighting by Kenneth Arnold, the first sighting labeled flying saucers, the official explanation in the Project Blue Book file is mirage, but mirage makes no sense. I've discussed 9 explanations that have been offered for the Kenneth Arnold sighting in a book I call 3 Minutes in June, the sighting that changed the world, the UFO sighting that changed the world, available at Amazon. But anyway, his sighting for 3 minutes has had, over the years, as many as 9 explanations offered for it. And that means that some people, the skeptics would say, well, if there are a lot of possible explanations, it must be explained. I reverse it and say if there's more than one explanation, it must be unexplained, because there's only supposed to be one, not several. Anyway, I noticed how it seemed to be somewhat unscientific to propose these stupid explanations, so I got interested in reading sightings, and I joined NICAP and the National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and started going on investigations. And then in 1974, I tackled one of the high risk, high payoff cases known as the Trent photo case. And the Trent photos, which were discussed by the Condon Committee, the Trent photos, the object is so clear, large and clear, that it's clearly either the real thing or a hoax. There's no halfway point. That's why I call it a high risk, high payoff. If it turns out to be real, then you've got your answer right there. These things are real. So I tackled that, realizing that I was getting into a big argument, but I couldn't understand why, if in the Condon report the sighting sort of had been endorsed as real, that no other credible scientists had taken up the challenge to either confirm or rebut what was written in the Condon report. So anyway, I got a hold of, by quite good fortune, got a hold of the negatives, and spent several years studying and talking to the Trents and so on. That's all on my website, which, by the way, is BRUMAC.mysite, MYSITE.com, brumac.mysite.com. All I got to do is just Google on my name, and you'll find my website. I scan through the website down near the bottom of the front page, and you'll find these sightings listed. There's 100 megabytes of stuff to keep you off the streets for a while. And I might mention that I don't pull any punches when it comes to scientific analysis. Some of this stuff is pretty complicated. Anyway, that's sort of how I got interested. I got interested because of the lousy explanations. The Air Force must have proposed lousy explanations for some reason or other. And I started my own investigations, and then in the latter 60s I got the first FBI file on the FBI flying disc file. The first person to get that, and that turned me on to the history of the subject. I had known some history of it by reading books before, but what was the hidden history of the subject, I started becoming a historian as well as a physicist, and I have a couple of books on the history out. One called The FBI-CIA UFO Connection at Amazon, and another one called The Legacy of 1952, the Year of the UFO. You read those two books and you'll find out how this whole thing started off and how it got garbaged up by Air Force. You'll find that a lot of the stuff that is being presented as new and novel about these objects that were seen by the Navy pilots, some certain characteristics the Navy pilots list for these objects were already known way back in 1947. But since nobody really believed, in particular the scientists who could have done something about it, the scientists who tended to ignore the whole thing, but if they had studied it, they would have found the same characteristics, such as high-speed acceleration so fast that they could seem to disappear right before your very eyes, alternately hover without any motion at all, not making any noise, having no normal airfoils, no wings, no fuselage, no tail planes, nothing that would look ordinary for flying. And this capability that the Navy pilots had noted of the objects sort of seeming to disappear at one place and reappear somewhere else miles away, that was already known back in 1947. But as I said, the scientific community and the population in general treated it as an artifact of the witness himself, a mistake of some sort, misidentification, and ignored all that stuff. So now you can go back and read up 60 or 70 years ago.
Interesting. Now, you started just dropping out there, so hopefully you're still there.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. Now, again, why don't you give your website? Why don't you, if you want to, mention a couple books, go ahead and do it.
Okay, well, our website is www.brumac, BRUMAC.mysite, MYSITE.com, brumac.mysite.com. I also have a Facebook page. And I've got this book I mentioned earlier called Abduction in My Life, which is a sort of novel, with a fact book built on the inside. So by the time you get finished with this book, you've had an adventure story having to do with abductions, combined with documentable proof that UFOs are real, I guess you could say, including sightings by my wife. And then the FBI-CIA UFO connection, which covers, brings in the FBI documents for the first time that I got way back in 1976 or 77, and the legacy of 1952. Why that year is important? It was the year with the most sightings collected by the Air Force in several months. April, May, June, July, and August of 1952, the Air Force was swamped, and that sort of set the policy for how they're going to treat UFO sightings for the rest of the time, basically trying to play them down, get rid of as many as possible. And then the book, which is the only book to thoroughly discuss the first sighting, which was recognized as being some new phenomenon, the flying saucer sighting by Kenneth Arnold on June 24th, 1947. He becomes an experienced pilot and a credible person. His story of seeing these semicircular, shiny things fly past Mount Rainier at 1,700 miles an hour. What he told his friends, they all thought it was a new type of jet airplane. But the point is, they took him seriously, and his story made it into the national press and then into the worldwide press. And after his story was published in a number of papers, other people started coming forward and saying, we saw weird stuff too. Of course, it was about a month later that the Roswell case was shot down as a balloon. So the Roswell case played virtually no role in the development of UFO history from 1947 all the way up until 1979, when the Roswell case sort of came back to life. But anyway, that's There's enough stuff on my website and in the books to